Redditors who have been in a coma, what was it like to wake up? In basic training, I caught meningitis and was in and out of a coma for about a week. I remember my military leadership visiting me, calling my wife to tell her, and being ambulanced to another hospital. But that's it. When I was awake, I was fully paralyzed from the neck down. My wife came to visit me and she told me I smelled like urine because they didn't give me a catheter nor did anyone help me to the bathroom. So, I just laid in bed and pissed myself over and over. I remember being so thirsty. When I fully woke up a few days later, I had very little feeling in my legs and was very wobbly when I walked. I couldn't fully outstretch my arms without severe pain in my hands. When I was released, I asked about why no one helped me and they told me they don't help any patients because they have too many people faking symptoms to get out of training. They sent me back to basic training where I slept for 3 days straight, only being woken to eat. When I woke up, after those 3 days, they gave me all my gear and sent me on a 4-mile forced march, during which I tripped 74 times, I counted and still remember, and fell down 6 times. Because I didn't quit on that march, they kept me in training and I graduated with the same class I started, which is unheard of and completely insane. I couldn't even finish the final fitness test, so they just pencil whipped the record, all because I didn't quit. It took me months to regain full feeling in my extremities. My uncle and dad were in a terrible wreck when they were both 19. My dad was out about 6 to 7 hours, remembers nothing. My uncle was in a coma for 6 weeks. He said he could hear every conversation, knew when people visited him but he couldn't communicate or move a muscle. He can still recall conversations people had while visiting him. He said his greatest fear was they would think he was dead and bury him. He was terrified because he couldn't react or communicate and didn't know what they would do with him. Then he woke up. He had some lifelong disabilities but went on to become the VP at his company in Texas. Edit, wow, I had no idea you awesome people would give my uncle's story so much response. Thanks for the awards. I had no idea where I was. I had no idea what happened. Months later I was still learning about who did, or didn't, visit, pray, call, ask. Finances were a total mess, trust me, companies do not care. Massive debt and financial penalties. And took over 18 months to get a job after painful physical rehabilitation and explaining over and over and over that I was in a coma, not just not working. Then the virus. I don't think I'll ever recover from this. There is no forgiveness for us. Recently, I totally lost it on a debt collector. I was screaming through the phone at him, do you think I planned this? What part of $0 do you not understand? Fortunately, I was given Social Security disability, so the working thing has a little relief, but it is a penance of what I used to earn. Unfortunately, because I got behind on child support, due to coma, the state is taking a major chunk out of my disability income to make up the arrears. I have to come up with $3,000. I don't have to go to court and maybe get that reduced. Both my boys are Marines now, but the state is still taking money for child support arrears, putting me further in a financial hole. A family friend was in a coma for just over a week and needed a lot of rehabilitation. The weirdest thing was the ongoing relearning. I distinctly remember visiting him once, many months after he'd been discharged from hospital and was mostly back to normal. He was walking to the lounge from the kitchen and the dog was laying in his way. He was chatting to us as he approached, then suddenly froze mid-sentence and mid-stride and stared down at the dog. After about 5 seconds he stepped over it and it was like he snapped back to reality. Apparently random parts of your memories get locked up or discarded when in a coma, and for him the what to do when the dog is in your way experience had been wiped, so his brain had to effectively work it out anew in that moment. His wife said this happened a lot at the start but was getting rarer as he got better. The frightening thing is there is no way to know what the patient has forgotten until they come to need it. My sister was in a car accident and sustained a massive head injury. She was in a coma for over 5 months. Waking up from a coma doesn't happen suddenly. It's gradual. She had to relearn everything starting with swallowing. She's missing her last year of high school and she cannot remember many things since her accident. Her short-term memory was damaged. Her damaged memory makes her very frustrated. Edit to add, her accident was in 1994. She graduated in 1993. She cannot remember grade 12. Sorry for the confusing statement. This was stunning for the family because she had just graduated. That whole year was gone. Second edit, the story of what happened. That weekend my sister had double booked herself. She was supposed to head to a car rally with me and my husband. She came to me and asked me if it was alright if she went to Whitby's with her best friends. This has bothered me for decades. If I had been an angrier sister, I would have told her to postpone her trip and come with us. But I wasn't and I'm still not like that. I told her to go have fun with her friends. That Saturday we got the call that she had been in a car accident. She was traveling down a rural highway when a lady blew a stop sign. My sister swerved to the left to avoid her. She's left-handed. Her car started to spin. She tried to correct and ended up swerving the car into oncoming traffic. She hit a pickup truck that was driving in the opposing lane and her car crumbled. She had her driver's side window partially down. Her head slammed down on the open window and she was cut from her ear to her chin. She was thrown against her friend in the passenger seat and broke her clavicle and her pelvis. Her friends had minor injuries. She was wearing her seatbelt but the twisty nature of the collision swung her from side to side. They used the jaws of life to extricate her from the vehicle. She was posturing, which is what happens when a person has a massive head injury. The emergency crew had a ferry return to docks so they could load her on. For 3 days we didn't know if she was going to survive. They drilled a hole in her head to relieve the pressure that was building due to her brain bleeding. She survived. Our family has been by her side ever since. The feeling of knowing something is supposed to be in there but it's not is really hard to describe and so incredibly frustrating. The closest thing I can think of to describe it is a word or name being on the tip of your tongue, but you can't quite recall it, only instead of words or names or titles, it's with memories. Some are worse, like having absolutely no clue what someone is talking about when they are reminiscing about something. Others are better, remembering small snippets of something happening but not the whole thing. Some are just straight up disconcerting, having no idea what happened during months of time of your life. Still yet some can be downright baffling. Most recently I was in a craft store and had some super strong emotional reaction over drawing pencils but have no clue why or what's important to me about them. It can be pretty exciting and overwhelming when something finally clicks and a whole flood of memory comes rushing in at all once though. I bought the pencils hoping one day it will trigger. I was out for 40 days after a motorcycle accident, but I don't remember much for about 6 weeks after that as well. I was sedated with ketamine and a mix of opiates and started to wean off of them while still on a ventilator and ECMO. I was extremely confused and seeing double, so I was terrified. Communicating was very hard because of the confusion and that I couldn't talk or write. The thing I remember most vividly is the insane hallucinations I had as a result of the ketamine. I was hallucinating something that was making me freak out and try to rip the tubes out of me, including my ventilator, chest tubes, and arterial lines, so they had no choice but to tie my limbs down and put boxing gloves on my hands. I had no idea I was doing any of that, but I had moments where I was significantly more aware of what was going on, which was so frustrating because I was completely tied down and again, couldn't communicate. The doctors and nurses kept trying to explain to me what I was doing and that I needed to stop, but I did not understand. I felt like I was being tortured and I couldn't understand why. At the time of my accident, I was in an online relationship that had become very rocky. I had booked a flight to meet the girl and my accident happened the day before my flight. This was only somewhat of a coincidence, as I was riding my motorcycle extremely recklessly due to my emotions and frustration in the relationship, and with my life for other reasons. My family knew about my relationship and was able to tell her, But it wasn't until about 3 months after the day of the accident that I talked to her for the first time by sending her a video. One of my respiratory therapists put a device on my tracheostomy so I was able to talk. This was an extremely emotional moment, and my mom was the first person to hear my voice. I used the device to talk on the phone with the girl, but it was difficult because the ventilator was loud and the device did not sound like my normal voice. My relationship with her was not the same and not recoverable. In hindsight, this was for the better, but in the moment, despite all the terrible things I was experiencing, the feeling of having lost the connection with this girl who was my first love was awful. By this time, I was becoming completely aware of what I did and what happened, and extremely conscious of what I had put my mom through, as she had been by my side every day in the hospital, not knowing if I would survive, or if I had sustained significant brain damage. After 5 months in the hospital, I was transferred to a rehabilitation facility, and 2 weeks later, December 2019, discharged home with a wheelchair and walker. I was gaining the ability to walk short distances on my own and even decided to start college again. Then the virus hit, and I also experienced some unfortunate medical complications that kept me in and out of the hospital for most of 2020. This is all very recent, but every aspect of my life has changed post-accident. My finances are ruined. My physical health is terrible, but given the fact that I have all my limbs and can still walk, I feel like I can't complain. I value time completely differently because of my continuing medical complications. I don't think I will live very long. It's a lot harder for me to get angry or upset about anything because it all feels insignificant compared to being tied down, unable to communicate, and in pain. I could write a book filled with details of the past and how I'm doing now, so I'll cut it off here. Edit should clarify that I can speak perfectly fine now with my original voice. My tracheostomy hole closed well. While it was closing, I could force air out of the tiny hole, and it sounded like a kazoo. I get tired of hearing myself talk about this as it's become my entire identity, and I don't like that feeling. Someday I'll make a blog detailing some of my unique medical experiences so the next me won't feel so alone when they Google their issues. Thanks everyone for the kind words. Thank you for listening to Campfire TTS. Please like, comment, and subscribe.